Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating top-secret event, that July 2026 meeting between King Charles and the Sussexes. But we aren't just looking at the logistics here. We're diving into the wildly conflicting narrative surrounding it. It's a classic Rashomon situation, where the truth completely depends on whose perspective you're looking through. Everyone is telling a totally different story about the exact same event. So let's dive right in by asking the central question that literally has everyone buzzing after this unprecedented family reunion. When the cameras are off and the PR teams are sidelined, can a fractured royal family actually heal behind closed doors? Well, to figure that out, we're going to quickly hit a few key areas. First, the secret Highgrove reunion itself. Then, the clashing agendas and demands. We'll look at Queen Camilla's moral support, a very candid health update from the king, and finally, steps toward royal reconciliation. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The secret Highgrove reunion. Let's start with the undisputed facts of what actually went down on July 10th at the king's private country residence. It had been a massive 4 years. 4 whole years since King Charles last met with Prince Harry, Meghan, and his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, all together in one room. That's 4 years of, very public estrangement, explosive interviews, and those revealing memoirs. So the stakes for this gathering? Absolutely sky high. And the cloak and dagger secrecy of this event was just next level. Notice who was purposefully kept completely in the dark here. Not only were the press and the general public totally clueless, but according to sources, even Prince William and Kate Middleton weren't told this was happening. It was a completely locked-down environment. It was uncharacteristically last minute for the king. 0 photographs taken, absolutely no official press releases issued afterwards. A source close to the Sussexes told Vanity Fair it was a watertight arrangement designed to prevent leaks. And honestly, they pulled it off. They completely succeeded in that immediate goal.
Section 2. Clashing agendas and demands. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The narrative completely splits the exact second the meeting ends, depending entirely on whose PR camp you're listening to.
We're looking at 2 totally contradictory reports here. On one side, the Sussex camp claims a joyful success. They say Harry felt buoyed and energized by the time spent with his father. But flip the script to the royal insiders, and we get a completely different vibe. They claim Meghan was left furious over a series of unmet demands. It's a textbook example of how the exact same hour can be spun in 2 drastically different directions. According to reports from royal commentators, those demands were actually pretty specific. Meghan allegedly sent a list to Buckingham Palace before the visit, and a huge request on that list was that Harry's stepmother, Queen Camilla, not be present for the reunion. But sources say King Charles completely orchestrated the terms of this meeting. The royals absolutely refused to let the Sussexes dictate how the visit would go down. Royal biographer Angela Levin really hit the nail on the head here. She noted that it was quite clever because the Sussexes couldn't do anything they wanted. Absolutely nothing. This wasn't just some casual family drop-in. For the palace, it was a carefully controlled environment with strictly enforced boundaries. The king had the upper hand, and the Sussexes just weren't permitted to control the narrative or the guest list. Section 3. Queen Camilla's moral support. Let's see how this strict power dynamic actually led to the frantic last-minute inclusion of the queen. The timeline of this is wild, highlighting just how rushed and high-stakes Camilla's involvement really was. On Friday afternoon, a time is finally agreed upon for the visit. Literally minutes later, Charles alerts Camilla, the only other royal he told. She was at her own estate, Ray-Milhouse, but she dropped everything. Didn't even tell her own family. 15 minutes later, she's rushing over to Highgrove to ensure she's there for the 1-hour reunion. So why the massive rush? Well, sources say Charles wanted Camilla there as a pillar of strength. There was real concern about keeping the meeting calm, and she was brought in to prevent any potential shouting matches. Regardless of all the royal titles and the palaces, this just boils down to a super universal human element, a spouse rushing in to provide moral support during a highly tense, unpredictable family conflict. Section 4. A candid health update. And honestly, this need for spousal support makes a whole lot more sense when we take a step back and look at the king's current, very real physical vulnerabilities. Just days after this highly scrutinized, top-secret meeting, King Charles traveled for his first visit to the Isle of Man since ascending to the throne. And while he was there meeting with a charity that supports veterans, he had this remarkably honest, totally unscripted interaction with a 104-year-old World War II veteran named James Fenton. When Mr. Fenton expressed concern for the king's health and told him he just had to keep going, Charles responded with a morbidly funny yet stark admission. He said, "It is terrible because bits keep dropping off." It's such an honest look at the harsh realities of his ongoing cancer recovery and just the physical toll of aging. And I think this brilliant insight really grounds our entire explainer today. Actually, scratch that. It anchors the whole story. When you strip away all the clashing egos, the lists of demands, and the media spin, the reality is just an aging father dealing with a severe, ongoing illness who ultimately just wanted to spend an hour with his estranged son and the grandchildren he hasn't seen in 4 years. That kind of human fragility really puts all the royal drama into sharp perspective. Section 5. Steps toward royal reconciliation. So, with all of this information laid out, what should we actually take away from this complex web of family drama and PR spin? Well, it starts with one footstep. A source close to Prince Harry pointed out after the meeting that every journey of 1,000 miles begins with just one step. For the Sussexes, simply getting into the same room with the king and queen, despite those rigid boundaries and all the underlying tension, was that necessary first step. But it definitely leaves us with this final lingering thought. Will this tightly controlled, highly secretive hour actually lead to genuine family healing? Or does the fact that both camps immediately retreated to their corners to leak competing narratives prove that the royal divide is just too wide to ever cross? It really forces us to wonder if the institution of the monarchy and the reality of a family can ever truly separate, or if every private, human moment is just going to become a public battleground. Something to think about for sure. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.